Have you ever, in the quiet of the late night, asked yourself this question? What is justice, really? What shape does it have? What does it taste like? And why? Why must we torment ourselves over it for our entire lives? 2,400 years ago, a group of men also wrestled with that very question, and their debate would forever change the way we see ourselves. Welcome to Book 1 of The Republic, Plato's Great Dialogue. I am your narrator, and tonight we are not looking for truth. We are looking for a fight. Our story doesn't begin in the elegant center of Athens, Number. It begins in a much rawer place, the port of Piraeus, a noisy, dusty place, thick with the smell of fish, the smell of salt, and the smell of money. A place of business, where the lofty rules of philosophy often give way to the cold numbers in a ledger. Socrates, our great philosopher, is on his way home, but he is stopped, not by guards, but by friends. They pull him into a house, a very, very wealthy house, the home of Cephalus. Picture the room, warm, luxurious. Cephalus sits there, a tycoon in retirement, a man who has lived almost his entire life. He represents old money, stability, a kind of morality from a bygone generation. And like all wealthy men nearing the end, he has begun to worry. He worries about the stories of the afterlife. He fears divine retribution. Socrates, with the keen eye of a doctor of the soul, asks him a simple question. "Sir, what is the greatest thing that your wealth has given you?" Cephalus answers with honesty. He says wealth has helped him avoid deceiving anyone, avoid being in debt to anyone. It helps him prepare to leave this world without fear. And so we have our first definition. Justice is to live honestly and to pay one's debts. A sound so beautiful, so reassuring, a clean financial statement for the soul. But Socrates, that troublesome philosopher, is never satisfied with easy answers. He asks, "Sir, if a friend lent you a weapon, and then one day he went mad and he came back demanding it, would you return the knife to a madman? Would paying your debt in that case still be justice?" And just like that, the first definition collapses. Cephalus, realizing this debate is beyond him, smiles. He says he is busy with a sacrifice and excuses himself. He hands over the argument to his son, Polemarchus, just as he would hand over his inheritance. Polemarchus is younger, more eager, and perhaps more hot-blooded. He offers the second definition, the definition of a warrior, of a man who would live and die for his brothers. Justice is to help your friends and harm your enemies. Does that sound familiar? Does it sound like the way our world still operates? Our side, their side. We live and die for our brothers. As for our enemies, we must crush them. It is the justice of tribal loyalty, of unwavering allegiance. But Socrates asks again, how do we know for sure who is our friend and who is our enemy? What if we are mistaken? And then he asks an even deeper question. Justice, a noble virtue, how can it include harming others? A good doctor makes people healthier. A good musician creates better music. So how can a just person intentionally make another person worse? The second definition also falters. The debate might have just circled like this forever, if it weren't for one man who had been sitting quietly, who had been coiled, and who could not now stand it any longer. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is when our beast appears. His name is Thrasymachus. He is not a philosopher seeking truth. He is a professional sophist, a man paid to teach others how to win arguments, regardless of right or wrong. Plato describes him lunging at us like a wild beast, ready to tear us apart. He roars. He shouts at Socrates. "What nonsense are you two talking?" Enough of this polite scraping and bowing. If you really want to know what justice is, then stop asking and start answering. The air in the room turns thick. Thrasymachus, his voice dripping with contempt and rage, throws down a sentence that will echo for millennia. A sentence that tears apart every moral facade we have ever built. He says, "Listen closely. Justice is nothing. Nothing other than the interest of the stronger." Please, take a moment. Hear that line again. Justice is the interest of the stronger. Does it send a chill down your spine? Thrasymachus explains, in every state, the strong are the ones who rule. Whether it's a tyrant, an oligarchy, or a democracy, the strong make the laws. And why do they make laws? To protect their own interests. And we, the weaker ones, the obedient sheep, when we follow those laws, we call it justice. You think you're being just? Thrasymachus scoffs. No. You are just obediently serving the interests of the one who rules you. A just sheep serves the interest of the shepherd. That's all. This is no longer philosophy. This is a slap in the face, a slap of brutal realism. But Thrasymachus isn't finished. He has one more punch to throw, a punch that hurts even more. He says, "Listen, Socrates, it's injustice that pays. It's injustice that brings rewards." He makes a distinction. Petty thieves, the ones who cheat a few dollars, when they get caught, they are shamed. They are called unjust. But what about a man who commits injustice on a magnificent scale? A tyrant, a man who plunders the entire city, who tramples on every law. He has everything: power, money, women. He lives above it all. And what do people call him? They call him Sir. They call him the Fortunate. Thrasymachus concludes, the perfectly unjust man is the happiest man. And the perfectly just man, that naive fool who tries to live righteously, is an idiot, a miserable failure. You see, the challenge has been set. This is not just a debate. This is an assault on the very root of morality. If Thrasymachus is right, then our entire effort to live a good life is meaningless. Socrates, in the rest of Book 1, tries. He twists. He turns. He uses every argument he has. He says, a true ruler is one who cares for the weak, like a doctor cares for the patient. He says, a just soul is more harmonious and stronger. Thrasymachus was gone. He had stormed out, perhaps, or simply sat back, sweating and fuming, defeated in logic, but not in spirit. But his words stayed. They hung in the air of that comfortable, wealthy room, thick and toxic. You know that feeling, don't you? When someone says something so cynical, so brutally honest, that it stains the air. Socrates may have won the argument, but no one felt like a winner. The poison was in. The seed of doubt had been planted. And that is when the real challenge began. It didn't come from an enemy full of rage. It came from a friend, full of despair. Glaucon, Plato's own brother, young, brilliant, and passionate. He wasn't trying to tear Socrates down. He was begging to be convinced. He turned to Socrates, his voice filled not with anger, but with a terrible sadness. "Socrates," he said, "I am not satisfied. I want to believe you. I want to believe that justice is better than injustice. But I look at the world, and I just don't see it. Thrasymachus, I think he gave up too easily. Please, Socrates, help me believe." This wasn't an attack. It was a plea from a young soul trying to find his moral compass in a world that seemed to reward the corrupt. Glaucon then laid out the challenge. "Socrates, tell me, what kind of good is justice? Is it good only for its own sake, like the simple joy of being alive? Or is it something painful, like bitter medicine, that we only endure because we know it will lead to a good result, like health? Or is it the highest good of all? Good in itself, and good for what comes from it?" Socrates, of course, chose the highest path. "Justice," he said, "is good in both ways." And Glaucon, he just shook his head. "Then Socrates, you have to prove it. And to prove it, you can't cheat. And here is the challenge that defines the Republic." Glaucon said, "We must do a thought experiment. We must imagine two men. The first man is perfectly, completely just. He would never harm a soul. But we must strip him of all rewards. In fact, let's give him the worst reputation imaginable. Let's make the entire world believe he is a monster. He is slandered, he is beaten, he is tortured, and finally, he is crucified. The second man is perfectly, completely unjust. He commits the most heinous crimes to get to the top. But he is a master of illusion. He fools everyone. The world sees him as a pillar of the community, a saint, a hero. He has wealth, power, fame, and the respect of all. Now, Socrates, tell me, which of these two men is happier? It is a terrifying question, a question that guts us. Is it better to be good and be tortured for it, or to seem good and be rewarded for being evil? To make his point, Glaucon told a story, a myth, the legend of the Ring of Gyges. Imagine, he said, a simple shepherd, Gyges. One day, a violent earthquake splits the earth open. He's terrified but curious. He climbs down into the chasm, and there he finds a tomb. Inside, a hollow bronze horse, and inside that, a corpse, larger than a man, wearing nothing but a single golden ring. He takes the ring. Later, back with his fellow shepherds, he's nervously twisting the ring on his finger, and suddenly, he vanishes. He's invisible. His friends start talking about him as if he weren't even there. He's stunned. He twists the ring back. He reappears. He has it. The ultimate power. Complete invisibility. Now, let's be honest with ourselves. You, me. What would you do if you had that ring? If you knew with absolute certainty that you would never, ever be caught? Would you still be good? Would you still pay your taxes if you could just take the money? Would you still be faithful? Would you still wait in line? Or would the temptation be too much? Glaucon argues that this ring simply reveals a truth we are all terrified to admit, that we are only just because we are weak, because we are afraid of the consequences. The just man and the unjust man, if you give them both the ring, they will walk the exact same dark path. Justice isn't something we love. It's a cage we build because we are afraid of each other. And just when Socrates was reeling from this, Glaucon's brother Adeimantus jumped in, and he twisted the knife. "And Glaucon," he said, "you've missed the worst part. It's not just that we're afraid of punishment, it's how we are raised. Our parents, our teachers, our culture. What do they really teach us? Do they say, 'My child, be just because it is good for your soul'? No, he shouted. They say, 'My child, seem just. Build a good reputation, because if people think you are just, you will get a good job. You will marry into a good family. You will be respected. And even the gods, they don't care if you are just, only that you perform the right rituals.' We are not taught to love justice. We are taught to love the rewards of justice. We are a society of actors, obsessed with the shadow, not the substance." The challenge was complete. Socrates was surrounded. He was cornered. Thrasymachus's cynicism and Glaucon's desperate doubt had come together. They had asked him to prove that justice, all by itself, naked, tortured, and spat upon by the entire world, is still better than injustice, which is praised, wealthy, and powerful. How in the world could he possibly prove that? And here, my friends, is the great pivot, the moment the entire book turns. Socrates was silent for a long time. Then he said, "The challenge you have given me, it's overwhelming. You are asking me to find justice in the tiny, complicated, hidden soul of a single person. It's like trying to read very small letters from very far away. I'm not sure I can do it." "But," he said, his eyes lighting up, What if we could find a place where those same letters are written very, very large? What if, instead of trying to find justice in one man, we build a city? What if we build a perfectly just city, right here, in our words, from the ground up? A city in speech. And if we can see how justice works on that grand public scale, in the large letters of the state, then maybe, just maybe, we can look back and finally see what it truly is in the small, beautiful, terrifying letters of the human soul. And so the debate ended. The creation was about to begin. So, the city in speech, our city of words, has been born. A city that started simple, with just a farmer and a builder, has now become feverish. It has luxuries, it has ambitions, and a city with ambitions needs an army. It needs guardians. But Socrates immediately poses the most dangerous question. It's easy to build an army, but how do you train them? How do you ensure that these guardians, these powerful, noble watchdogs, don't turn around and tear apart the very citizens they are meant to protect? Socrates' answer lies in education. But not the kind of education you and I might think of. He isn't talking about mathematics or economics or how to build a bridge. He is talking about stories. He is talking about the music they hear, the poems they recite. He says the soul of a child is like soft wax. Whatever you impress upon it in those first tender years will set. It will become the foundation of who they are forever. And then he asks a question that should make all of us stop. What stories are we telling our children? What are we feeding their souls? In Athens, they were fed on Homer, on the great epics, the Iliad, the Odyssey. These were their Bibles, their textbooks, their blockbusters, all rolled into one. But Socrates, he puts them on trial. He says, "Look at what we are teaching them. We tell our children stories of the gods, of Zeus, the king of all, who is a liar, a serial adulterer, a monster who overthrew his own father. We tell them of Achilles, our greatest hero, who, when he is slighted, sulks in his tent like a child, who disrespects his commander, who brutally desecrates the body of his fallen foe. And, worst of all, he is terrified of death." Socrates' voice rings with passion here. How, he asks, how can you possibly teach a young soldier to be brave, to face death for the city, if you also teach him that the afterlife is a dark, miserable, shadowy place? A place so horrible that Achilles himself said he would rather be the poorest slave on earth than the king of all the dead. You cannot teach courage while also teaching the fear of death. You cannot teach self-control while showing them gods who are slaves to lust. And so, Plato begins the greatest, most terrifying cultural purge in the history of philosophy. He proposes a strict censorship. Cut it. Erase it. We must ban the poets, he says. We must pass laws. We will only allow stories that show the gods as they truly are, good and unchanging and honest. We will only tell stories of heroes who are brave, who are dignified, who face death with calm, and who obey their commanders. And it's not just the words, it's the music. This is how deeply he wants to go. He says we must ban the musical modes, the scales that sound like weeping, that are soft, that encourage laziness or drunkenness. We will keep only two: the mode of courage, the rhythm of a soldier in battle, and the mode of temperance, the sound of a person at peace, living wisely. You are probably thinking, this is monstrous. This is totalitarianism. This is the end of art. And you are right. It is terrifying. But let's pause for a second. Let's be honest. Don't we do this in our own small way? Don't we try desperately to shield our own children from things we think are toxic? Don't we try to find good role models for them? Don't we worry about the music they listen to, the images they see? Socrates is just taking that parental instinct, that human desire to protect, and pushing it to its absolute, logical, terrifying conclusion. He is not building a free society. He is forging a perfect tool. He is crafting the perfect cradle for these golden souls, ensuring that from the moment they are born, every single thing they see and hear and touch is designed to make them balanced, brave, and loyal. But censorship, removing the bad, is not enough. You must also add something. You must fill the void with a new story. A story so powerful, so profound, that it will hold the entire city together. And this, my friends, is where Plato introduces one of the most controversial, most brilliant, and most human ideas of all time. An idea that politicians to this very day have never stopped using. He calls it the noble lie. A genaion pseudos, a grand foundational fiction. Socrates himself shuffles his feet. He's almost embarrassed to say it. How, he stammers, how can we invent a story that will convince everyone? We will go to the people, he says, to all the citizens, including the guardians themselves, and we will tell them a story, a myth. All of you, we will say, all of your lives, your training, your education, it was all just a dream. In reality, you were being formed deep inside the earth. This land, this city, she is not just your nation. She is your mother. She bore you. And all of you, every single person in this city, you are brothers, you are sisters, born from the same soil. What is the purpose of this first lie? To bind them to the land, to make them love the city not as a political entity, but as their actual mother. To make them love each other, not as fellow citizens, but as blood relatives. It's a lie designed to create ultimate patriotism and ultimate unity. But the lie has a second part, a part even more critical. When your Mother Earth was fashioning you, we will continue, the God who made you mixed a different metal into each of your souls. Those of you who are fit to rule, he mixed gold into your very being. Those of you who are born to be soldiers, to be the guardians and auxiliaries, he mixed in silver. And those of you who are born to be farmers, craftsmen, and producers, he mixed in bronze and iron. Do you see the power of this? Do you see what this story does? It locks in the social order forever. It makes it divine. It makes it natural. If you are born a bronze soul, you will accept your station. It is not a social failure, it is your nature. It is what God made you to do. You will not be filled with envy for the gold souls. And the gold souls, they will not rule because they are better or richer. They will rule because they carry the burden of gold. It is their responsibility, a divine, heavy, and lonely responsibility. It is a lie designed to create harmony. A lie designed to make everyone accept their purpose. A lie designed to extinguish the fires of envy and personal ambition that tear every other society apart. Our city of words, now has its army. An army educated with pure stories, strengthened by pure music. And now it has its soul. It has its grand, unifying myth. The foundations are set. The stage is ready. And now, at last, we can finally begin the hunt for the very thing we came to find: justice. Where is it hiding in this perfect, terrible city? The city is built. The walls are up. The guardians are being trained with purified stories, and the noble lie has been told, settling every citizen into their divine metallic destiny. Our city, our Callipolis in speech, is complete. But just as Socrates is about to move on, perhaps with a sigh of relief, a voice, Adamantus's voice, Glaucon's brother, breaks the silence. And his question is so human, it almost shatters the entire project. Socrates, are these guardians of yours even happy? He leans in. You've taken everything from them. No private property, no gold or silver, no families to call their own. They are like mercenaries who get nothing but room and board. You are making them the most powerful people in the city, and also the most miserable. You can feel the tension. This is the question we all ask, isn't it? What's the point of being good if you can't be happy? If you can't enjoy the fruits of your labor? Socrates, he doesn't flinch. He smiles, and he tells a beautiful, simple analogy. Adamantus, he says, imagine we are painting a statue, a beautiful human statue, and someone comes up to us and criticizes. Why haven't you painted the eyes with the most beautiful color? Why haven't you used purple? What would we say? We would say, my friend, we are not trying to make one part, the eyes, so beautiful that it's no longer an eye. We are trying to make the entire statue beautiful. Our goal is not to make one class, the guardians, deliriously happy at the expense of everyone else. Our goal is to make the entire city, the whole, as happy and as harmonious as it can possibly be. And with that, he declares the city finished. It is perfect. And if it is perfect, it must contain the four great virtues: wisdom, courage, temperance, and the one we've been hunting for all this time: justice. The search begins. He says, "It's like a dark wooded place. We must be hunters, we must beat the bushes, or our prize will slip away." First he finds wisdom. Where is it? It's not in the carpenters or the farmers. They have skills, yes, but not wisdom for the city. No, the wisdom of the city is found only in that tiny, smallest class, the golden-souled rulers, the true guardians. It is the knowledge of how to manage the city as a whole. One virtue found. Next, courage. Where is the courage of the city? He finds it in the silver-souled soldiers, the auxiliaries. But it is not, and this is so important, it is not just the bravery of a lion. It's not a blind animal instinct. Number. Socrates defines it as a kind of preservation. He says, it is the power to hold on to the right belief about what should be feared and what should not be feared, no matter what happens. It is a courage that has been dyed, stained into their very souls by the education we gave them. It is a loyalty that will not wash out. Two virtues found. Third, temperance. This one is different. He says it's not located in just one part. It is a harmony. It is a song sung by the entire city. It is the simple, beautiful, universal agreement of all three classes: the rulers, the soldiers, and the producers, about who should rule and who should be ruled. It is the acceptance of the bronze souls that the gold souls should lead. It is the self-control, the self-mastery of the entire city. Three virtues found. Socrates pauses. We have found three. What is left? What is the one thing that we set down at the very beginning as the guiding principle for our entire city? And then, the great reveal, the simplest, most profound answer. Justice. Justice is nothing more and nothing less than minding one's own business. It is the principle of specialization that we started with. It is the farmer farming, the soldier soldiering, the ruler ruling. It is the act of each person doing the one job for which nature and our noble lie has suited them. And not meddling, not trying to be a farmer and a soldier and a ruler all at once. Injustice is the meddling. Injustice is the carpenter trying to rule the city. Justice is the harmony of a society where everyone is playing their perfect part. The city is done. The hunt is over. But it's not. It's not over. Because this was all just a game. This was all just an analogy. The city was just a way to read the large letters. Now, Socrates says, we must turn back. we must look for this same pattern in the small letters of the individual human soul. And this is the moment. The moment the camera turns from the cosmos to the intimate. He looks at Glaucon. He looks at us. And he says, "Do you think that we do not have these same three parts inside of us?" And he begins to draw the map of you, the map of me. He says, "Our soul is not one thing. It is a civil war. It is a kingdom." First, he says, there is the part of us that learns, that calculates, that thinks. The part that weighs the options. The part that knows that water is probably bad for me. This is reason. This is our inner ruler, our inner gold. Then, he says, there is the part of us that desires, the part that wants, the part that screams, "But I am thirsty." The part that longs for food, for drink, for sex, for money, for everything. This is appetite, the multi-headed beast. This is our inner producer class, our inner bronze. But, he says, there must be a third part. Because, what about anger? What about pride? What about shame? What about the feeling that rises up in you when you are insulted? Or the part of you that gets angry at yourself for wanting something you know you shouldn't? This, he says, is spirit, the lion, the part that loves honor and fights for what it believes is right. This is our inner soldier, our inner silver. And his proof is so simple, so human. A man is thirsty, Socrates says, but he chooses not to drink. Does this not prove that there is one part of him, his reason, pulling him back, and another part, his appetite, dragging him forward? The soul is not one. It is three. A trinity. A kingdom of a ruler, a soldier, and a mob. And now at last, he can answer the question: what is justice in a single person? He turns to Glaucon, and the room is silent. Justice in the human soul is the exact same thing as in the city. It is not a law. It is not a rule. It is health. It is the state of a soul in harmony. It is that beautiful, perfect order when your reason, your inner ruler, allied with your spirit, your inner soldier, is in firm, wise, gentle control of your appetites. And injustice is sickness. It is the state of disease, of civil war, when your appetites, the beast, overthrows your reason, when your desires rule your life, when you are no longer a king of your own soul, but a slave to your own. Socrates thought he was finished. He thought the hunt was over. Justice had been found, a beautiful, perfect harmony in the city and in the soul. He was ready, perhaps, to move on, to finally discuss the decay of nations, a much safer topic. But you can feel the shift in the room. The air gets tight. Plato, with his novelist's eye, describes it perfectly. He sees Polemarchus tugging on his brother Adamantus's cloak, whispering, "What should we do? Should we let him go?" Adamantus whispers back, "No, we're not letting him go." Polemarchus clears his throat. "Socrates, we think you have been lazy. We think you skipped the most important part." Socrates freezes. He knows exactly what they mean. "You mumbled," Polemarchus says, "about that strange idea that friends will have all things in common. You just glossed over the whole women and children part. You can't do that. You must explain it. Now." Socrates groans. He knows what he is about to unleash. He tells them, "You have no idea what you are doing. You are stirring up a hornet's nest. You are asking me to describe a theory that I myself am not sure of. I am afraid. I am afraid of being ridiculed. This is not the confident, all-knowing Socrates. This is a man afraid of being laughed at, afraid of the power of his own ideas. But they insist, and so he sighs, and inhales deeply, takes a deep breath. "Very well," he says, "but I must warn you. I am about to face 3 great waves. 3 waves of argument, each one bigger than the last, and each one threatening to drown me completely." And so it begins. The first wave. He says the first wave is the question of women, and he drops his first bombshell. "In our perfect city," he says, "the women of the guardian class will have the exact same education and the exact same jobs as the men." We must let that sink in. This is not modern-day New York. This is ancient Athens, a society where good women were invisible, where they were kept at home, uneducated, their sole purpose to bear sons. And Socrates, this man, is casually proposing complete professional equality. He is proposing female soldiers, female rulers. The entire room must have thought he was insane. His friends probably said, "Socrates, it's unnatural. Men and women are different." And Socrates, in a moment of stunning clarity, gives his answer. Yes, they are different. A man bears children. A woman gives birth to them. But, my friends, is that relevant? He makes an analogy. A bald man and a man with a full head of hair are different. Does that mean that one is a better cobbler? Number. The difference has nothing to do with the soul. He argues that the difference between male and female is only biological. It has nothing to do with their nature. A woman can have a gold soul, just as a man can. A woman can be born to rule, just as a man can. Therefore, he concludes, if a woman has the nature of a guardian, we must give her the education of a guardian, and she must guard. The first wave hits. It's shocking, it's revolutionary, and 2,400 years later, we are still having this argument. He survives. He stands, dripping, on the shore. Now, he says, "Are you ready for the second wave?" And this wave is a tsunami. This wave, he says, is even more ridiculous and even more difficult than the first. The women of our guardian class will all be wives in common to all the men. No man shall have a private wife, and the children too will be in common. No parent shall ever know its own child, and no child shall ever know its own parent. This is it. This is the moment. The book, and perhaps all of philosophy, goes completely off the rails. It's not just free love. It is eugenics. It is state-controlled breeding. He describes mating festivals where the best rulers are secretly rigged to breed with the best, where children once born are immediately taken to a communal nursery. The good ones are raised by nurses. The defective ones are disposed of. It is horrifying. It is inhuman. Our first instinct is to close the book, to call Plato a monster. But we must ask why. Why would a mind as brilliant as Plato's propose something so grotesque? What is the goal? And the goal is the most human thing of all. Unity. Plato is terrified of one word, the word mine. My wife, my child, my family, my property. He looks at the world and he sees correctly that this word, mine, is the root of all corruption. It is the root of nepotism. I must help my son get the job. It is the root of greed. I must hoard wealth for my family. It is the root of all division. Plato wants to create a city that is not a collection of families, but one single family. He wants a city that acts like one body. A city where if one person stubs their toe, the entire city says, "I am in pain." To achieve this, he must destroy the private family. He must make it so that every guardian looks at every other guardian and says, "That is my brother. That is my sister." He must make it so that every ruler looks at every child and thinks, "That might be my son." It is a monstrous solution, but it is a solution to a very, very real human disease. The disease of me first. He has survived the second wave. And now, he is shaking. He is terrified. "You do not know," he says to Glaucon, "what you have done. The third wave, this one, is the biggest. This is the one that will truly, finally, drown me in laughter and contempt." Glaucon says, "Speak, Socrates. Don't be afraid." And Socrates takes his final breath. He says, "All right, but Glaucon, your city, this beautiful, perfect city and speech, it is a fantasy. It will never exist on Earth, just as you have described it. Unless philosophers become kings. Or unless the people we now call kings and rulers truly and adequately philosophize." This is the punchline. This is the most famous, most arrogant, most misunderstood sentence in all of political philosophy. Think about it. In their world, just as in ours, who are the philosophers? They are useless. They are weirdos. They are stargazers, cloud talkers, men who are so busy thinking about the heavens they fall into a ditch, just like Thales. And who are the kings? Who are the politicians? They are the practical men, the deal makers, the men of action. And Socrates is saying, this is our problem. Our entire system is upside down. We are living in a world where the people who know nothing are in charge. And the only people, the only ones who are qualified to rule, the ones who have actually studied what justice is, what truth is, what goodness is. We laugh at them, and we call them useless. He says, the true philosopher is the only person who is not in love with power. They are in love with truth. They would rather be studying the eternal forms than ruling a city. And that lack of desire is precisely what makes them the only ones fit to rule. They would rule not because they want to, but because they have to. Out of duty, out of necessity, because the only thing worse than ruling is being ruled by someone worse than yourself. The three waves have crashed. Equality, the end of family, the Philosopher-King, the perfect, insane, and tragic blueprint is now complete. Socrates has just survived. He has faced the three great waves. He stands soaked and shaking on the shore, having declared that philosophers must be kings. And the reaction from the room, from the world, from us is predictable. Laughter, scorn, and anger. Adeimantus, ever the pragmatist, speaks for us all. "Socrates," he says, "that's a beautiful speech. But look at the facts. Look at the real world. The people who actually go into philosophy, most of them, are useless. They are weirdos. They are social outcasts. They can't even manage their own homes, let alone a city. And the ones who aren't useless, the really smart ones, they become vicious. They become clever monsters. Your philosophers are either useless or evil. How can you tell us that these are the people who must rule. This is a body blow, because it's true, or it feels true. We all know that person, the brilliant mind with no common sense, the genius with no heart. How can Socrates defend this? And his defense is perhaps the most profound part of the entire book. First, he addresses the useless philosopher, and he gives us an analogy, the analogy of the ship. Imagine, he says, a ship. The ship owner is the people. He's big, he's strong, but he's a little deaf. His eyesight is bad, and he knows nothing about navigation. And on this ship, there is a crew, the sailors. These are the politicians. And what are these sailors doing? They are not sailing the ship. They are fighting. They are fighting over who gets to be the captain. They drug the ship owner. They flatter him. They lie. They cheat. They will kill just to get their hands on the tiller. And none of them, not one, has ever actually learned the art of navigation. Meanwhile, Socrates says, there is one person on that ship who has. The true pilot, the true navigator. And what is he doing? He is in a corner, looking up. He is studying the stars. He is studying the winds. He is studying the seasons. He is trying to actually figure out where the ship is and where it needs to go. And the crew, the mutinous sailors, what do they call him? They laugh at him. They point. Look at that useless dreamer, that stargazer. They don't even realize that he is the only one on the entire ship who knows how to get them home. So, Socrates concludes, is the philosopher useless, or has he been made useless by a mutinous society that would rather crash than give up control? The first charge is answered, but what about the second? What about the vicious philosopher, the evil genius? And here, Socrates' insight is chilling. He says, the greatest crimes are not committed by petty souls. A small, weak nature will never do great good or great evil. Number. The most monstrous acts are committed by the greatest souls that have been corrupted. He says, a truly philosophic nature, a soul born with the potential for gold, is like a powerful exotic seed. If that seed is planted in good soil with the right education, it will grow into something divine. But if you take that same seed and plant it in bad soil, in a corrupt, shallow society, a society that rewards flattery and wealth and power, a society he implies like ours, what happens? That powerful nature doesn't just die, it warps. It uses its great intelligence, its great passion, its great courage, not for truth, but for power. It becomes the cleverest monster, the vicious philosopher. So, Socrates says, the problem isn't philosophy. The problem is the world. The true philosopher, he says, is a survivor a rare plant that has somehow managed to grow true in a hostile wasteland. And this rare survivor, this is the one who must be king. And Glaucon, he is finally almost convinced. Okay, Socrates, okay. This true philosopher, what is the highest thing he must know? What is this ultimate knowledge that makes him fit to rule? And Socrates, for the first time, hesitates. He becomes afraid. Glaucon, he whispers, you are pushing me to the very edge. You are asking me to describe the very highest, the very greatest thing of all. What is it? Glaucon insists. It is, Socrates says, the form of the good. A silence. The good? What does that even mean? Please, Glaucon begs, tell us. Just tell us what it is. And Socrates, he recoils. I can't, he says. Don't ask me. It is too much. It is blinding. I can't pay you the principle, the truth of the good itself. But maybe I can describe its offspring, its child, who is just like it. And here he gives us the analogy of the sun. He says, Glaucon, let's talk about what do we need to see? Well, Glaucon says, you need an eye, the power to see. And you need an object, the thing to be seen. Is that all? Socrates asks. Is that enough? Yes? No, Socrates says. Think. You can have a perfectly healthy eye and a beautiful object in a perfectly dark room. Will you see it? No. You need a third thing. You need light. And this light, where does it come from? From the sun, Glaucon says, finally understanding. Yes, Socrates says, the sun. And the sun. What is the sun? It is not itself, and it is not the object itself. It is a third, higher thing that makes sight possible. And what else does the sun do? It doesn't just illuminate, does it? It gives life. It is the source of all growth, all nourishment, all existence in the visible world. Now, Socrates says, bringing it all home, let's go to the invisible world, the world of the soul. The soul also has an eye. We call it reason, and it looks at invisible objects. We call them the forms. The form of justice, the form of beauty, the form of courage. And just like the eye, the soul's reason and the forms are not enough. They too need a third thing. They need a light. A light we call truth. And this truth, this spiritual light, where does it come from? It comes from the form of the good. The good is the sun for your soul. It is not truth itself. It is not justice itself. It is the higher, transcendent source that illuminates all other forms. It is the very reason we can know anything at all. It is the light that makes understanding possible. And just like the sun, it does one more thing. It doesn't just illuminate. It creates. The form of the good is the ultimate source of the very existence of everything, of justice, of beauty, of reality itself. It is, Socrates says, his voice dropping to a whisper, beyond being. It is not a thing. It is the reason that things are. This is what the Philosopher-King stares at. Not power, not money, not shadows. He is the one who has turned from the darkness and has learned to look at the Sunday. And now, Socrates says, let me give you a map of this new world. A map that leads from the lowest shadow to the sun itself. And he gives him the divided line. Socrates has just given us the map, the divided line, the ladder from the lowest guess to the highest truth. But a map is not the journey. He has shown us the sun, the form of the good, but he has only described it through its child, the physical sun. And Glaucon and all of us, we are still confused. How can this not be an abstraction? What does it feel like? Socrates, knowing this, knowing the limits of logic, now prepares to give us a story, a myth, the most famous story in the history of philosophy. Next then, he says, his voice low, let me make an image for you. An image of our nature in its education and its lack of it. Not their nature, not some people, our nature, yours and mine. Imagine, he says, imagine an underground dwelling, a cave. And in this cave are people, human beings. They have been there since birth. Their legs and their necks are chained so that they cannot move. They cannot even turn their heads. All they can do for their entire lives is stare at the wall in front of them. What is their reality? What do they see? Behind them, Socrates continues, and above them a fire is blazing. And between the fire and the prisoners there is a raised path. And along this path, there is a low wall, like the screen a puppeteer hides behind before he shows his puppets. And all day people, and we wonder who these people are walking behind that wall. They are carrying objects on their heads, statues of men, of animals, of everything. Some of the puppeteers are talking, some are silent. The fire casts the shadows of these objects onto the wall in front of the prisoners. So tell me, Socrates asks, what would these prisoners believe truth is? Glaucon whispers, the shadows. Yes, Socrates says, the shadows. And if the puppeteers spoke and the cave echoed, the prisoners would believe that the shadows themselves were speaking. This, Glaucon, is their entire world, their truth, their reality, their gods, their politics, their hopes, their fears. All of it is a dance of shadows on a stone wall. Now watch. What would happen if one of them was released? Who releases him? Plato never tells us. It is the mystery, an act of grace, of philosophy, of chance. What if he was compelled to stand up, suddenly? The first feeling would not be enlightenment. The first feeling would be pain, his legs asleep for a lifetime, his neck locked in one position. To stand would be agony. To turn his head would be a torment. And what would he see? He would turn, and his eyes, unaccustomed to anything but pitch black, would look directly into the fire. He would be seared, blinded. He would cry out in pain. He would flinch. He would turn back. He would beg to be put back in his chains where the shadows were soft and comfortable and made sense. But what if the helper, whoever this is, showed him the puppets, the real statues, and asked him, "What is this?" He wouldn't know. He would be confused. He would say, "That is not real. The shadow on the wall, that was real. This is a trick." He would be terrified. He would resist this education. And so, Socrates says, his voice hardening, what if this helper dragged him by force, up the rough, steep ascent, up out of the cave, and dragged him out into the upper world? What would he feel when he came out into the sunlight? He would be blind, not metaphorically, literally, blind. His eyes would be filled with so much light he would see nothing. Nothing at all. This is the first stage of philosophy. Not wisdom, just pure blinding confusion. He couldn't look at the sun. That is madness. He couldn't even look at a tree or a person. So how does he learn? How do his eyes adjust? Socrates says, first he would have to look at the shadows of the real things, the shadows of the trees, the shadows of the people. Then he would look at the reflections in the water. He would see the reflections of the trees and the people, a clearer image. Then, at night, he would find it easier. He would look up. He would see the moon. He would see the stars, the lesser lights. And then, finally, after weeks, months, maybe years of this painful adjustment, he would be able at last to lift his head in the daytime and look at the source of it all. He would look at the sun. And in that moment he would understand. He would understand that this is the source. This sun is the thing that gives the light, that creates the shadows, that illuminates the reflections, that governs the seasons, that gives life and growth to everything in this real world. He would understand that the sun is the good. And in that moment of pure understanding, what would he feel? He would feel pity. He would think about his friends, his old home in the dark. He would think about the honors they gave each other, the prizes they won for being the best at guessing which shadow comes next. He would see all the politics, all the fame, all the power of his old world as just a pathetic game, a game of shadows. He would rather be the poorest servant on earth in this real world than a king in that dark kingdom of the blind. But his journey is not over. He must go back. This is the duty of the Philosopher-King. He doesn't want to. Who would? Who would leave the sun to go back to the darkness? But he must. He must go back to help the others. So he descends back into the cave. And what happens? His eyes, now filled with the memory of the sun, are useless in the dark. He stumbles. He can't see anything. He is blind again. He sits down next to his old friends. They are still there, chained. They are still playing their game. "Look," they whisper, "a shadow of a bird." And he, our philosopher, he squints. He blinks. He can't see it. The shadows are too faint for his light-filled eyes. "What bird?" he asks. I don't see anything." And the prisoners, what do? They laugh. They laugh at him. They mock him. They point. "Look at him. He went up to the light, and look, he came back ruined. His eyes are broken." They conclude that the journey up is worthless. They conclude that it is dangerous. "And now," Socrates asks, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper, "if this man in his pity tried to break their chains, if he tried to free them, if he tried to force them to turn and drag them up to the light, wouldn't they kill him for it?" The room is still. The echo of that question of Socrates' own trial hangs in the air, a prophecy. "This Glaucon," Socrates says, concluding, "this is the image of our lives. The cave is the world we see with our senses. The fire is our physical sun. The world above is the intelligible realm, the world of truth, of forms. And the sun is the form of the good. And education is not what some people say it is. It is not putting knowledge into a blind eye, like sight into a blind eye. No, the soul already has the eye. Education is the art of turning the entire soul around, turning it from the world of shadows and becoming to the world of light and being, until it can finally bear to look at the sun itself. The philosopher is the one who has returned. And he must rule, not because he wants to live in the cave, but because he is the only one who knows that they are just shadows. So, the city is built, Callipolis, the perfect, beautiful dream. The philosopher-kings are ruling, the soldiers are guarding, the producers are producing. All is harmony, all is justice. For a generation. This, my friends, is the tragedy. This is where Plato, the poet, becomes a prophet. This is Book 8, the story of the fall. How does the perfect city die? Not from an invading army, not from a plague. No, the city dies from within. It dies from a human error, a simple miscalculation. Socrates calls it the number. The rulers, the wise philosophers, they are still human. They get the math wrong. They miscalculate the perfect time for breeding. And in that single moment of human imperfection, a child is born. The child who is not gold. The child who has silver or bronze in his soul. The purity is lost, and the perfect harmony is broken. And so the fall begins, the first degradation. From aristocracy, the rule of the best, the rule of reason, to timocracy, the rule of honor. This is the city ruled by the silver souls, the soldiers. This is the son of the philosopher-king. He is not a philosopher. He loves his father, he respects him. But he's a little ashamed of him, and he listens to his mother. He hears her complaining, whispering in his ear. Your father, he isn't a real man. He has no money. He has no power. He doesn't care about winning. When he was insulted in the marketplace, he just walked away. He is weak. And the son, he clenches his fists. He is not like his father. He loves the gymnasium. He loves competition. He loves the applause. He loves winning. He is a man of spirit. He is silver. And when he takes power, he changes the city. He introduces property. He introduces status. The soul of the city has fallen from reason down into spirit. But the fall doesn't stop there. The son of the timocrat, the man of honor, he is different. He grows up watching his soldier father. He sees the honor, he sees the medals, but he also sees his father's poverty. He sees his father get cheated in a lawsuit because he is too proud to argue about money. He sees his family's honor lead to financial ruin. And the grandson of the philosopher, he scoffs. Honor, he says. You can't eat honor. His soul is not gold or silver. It is bronze. He is ruled by appetite, but the disciplined, necessary appetite, the love of money. And so the city transforms again. It becomes an oligarchy, the rule of the few, the rule of the rich. A new law is passed. A number is written in the Constitution. You must have this much money to rule. If you are rich, you are a citizen. If you are poor, you are nothing. The soul of the city has fallen from spirit down into greed. And this city, Socrates says, is not one city. It is two. The city of the rich and the city of the poor, living side by side, hating each other. The rich grow soft, decadent, useless. They are drones. And the poor, they watch. They work. They grow hard. They grow lean. They are sunburnt. And they grow angry. They stand next to the soft, pale oligarch in battle, and they see the fear in his eyes. and they whisper to each other, "This man is weak. He is rich only because we let him be." The spark is lit. The son of the oligarch. He grows up in a prison of thrift. His father counts every coin. He starves every desire that doesn't make money. He calls them unnecessary appetites, and the son hates him for it. He dreams of spending, of living, of feeling. And when the revolution comes, and it does come, the poor rise up, driven by some young, indebted aristocrat. The son is liberated. He is bathed in a flood of new ideas, new freedoms, and the city becomes a democracy, the rule of the people. And what is the soul of this city? Freedom. Absolute freedom. Plato's voice here is full of disgust, but also fascination. The city becomes a bazaar of appetites, he says, a supermarket of lifestyles. You can do anything. You can be a soldier today, a businessman tomorrow, a philosopher in the morning, and a poet at night. There is no order, there is no expertise. The teacher fears the student, the father panders to the son. Even the animals, he says, walk with more arrogance. Every desire is equal. The necessary desire for food is no better than the unnecessary desire for rare flowers or exotic pleasures. The soul of the democratic man is not evil, it is just chaotic. It is a coat of many colors. It has no king, no ruler. The human, lion, and beast are all given equal votes. The soul of the city has fallen from necessary greed into the total anarchy of all appetites. But this chaos, this excess of freedom, it cannot last. It becomes exhausting. The people become drunk and sick on freedom. The city is full of angry drones, the rich who lost their money, and the poor who want more. And in this chaos, in this fear, the people grow tired. They grow afraid of their own freedom. And they look for one man, one strong man, a protector, someone strong, someone who will restore order, someone who will speak for the people against the corrupt elite. And this man, he rises. The people give him power. He tastes it. And Plato says he tastes blood. He falsely accuses an enemy. He has him killed. He asks for a bodyguard to protect him from his enemies. The people give it to him. He starts a war to make himself necessary. He purges the rich. Then he purges the brave. Then he purges the wise. He fears anyone who is good, anyone who will not flatter him, until he is left surrounded only by slaves and thugs. And the people who begged for a protector to save them from chaos wake up and find they have willingly put on the chains of a master. The final city is born. Tyranny. The fall is complete. From the gold of reason to the pitch black of the single monstrous appetite. Plato has just given us a history of the world. But more than that, he has given us a biography of a soul. He has shown us how a good man, a good city can fall, how reason can give way to anger, how anger can give way to greed, how greed can explode into chaos, and how chaos always, always begs for a master. The fall is complete. The city has become a prison. The protector has become the tyrant. The final degradation. In Book 8, we watched the city fall. Now, in Book 9, Plato grabs us by the hand. "Come," he whispers. "We are going inside." This is not political science. This is a spiritual autopsy. How is a monster born? How does a human become a tyrant? Plato says the seed is inside all of us. He says, think about your dreams. Think about that dark, lawless part of your soul that only comes out when your reason is asleep. The part of you that dreams of forbidden things, of violence, of lust, of power, of murder, of incest. We all have this beast inside us, but in a healthy person, reason and law keep it chained in the basement of the soul. But the tyrant? The tyrant is a man who is awake but lives his nightmares. He is a sleepwalker with a sword. And how does this happen? It begins with the democratic man, the man of chaos who says all desires are equal. But in that chaos, one desire, one dark, monstrous appetite, Plato calls it eros, a dark, terrible passion. It grows stronger than the others. It becomes a master passion. It's an addiction. It sits in the center of his soul like a great winged drone, and it buzzes. And it demands to be fed. At first it just devours his money, his inheritance. Then it needs more, so it makes him steal from his neighbors. Then it makes him betray his friends. And finally, the ultimate sin. The beast is so hungry it makes him look at his own parents, his mother and father, and he steals from them. He strikes them. He enslaves them to feed his one great addiction. This is the portrait of a soul that has eaten itself. And this man annoyed this addict, this parasite, this monster. This is the man who the people in their madness have put on the throne. And now he has everything. He has absolute power. He has the keys to the entire city. He can do anything. He can take anything. He can kill anyone. He is completely unjust and completely successful. This is the man Glaucon asked us to consider in Book 2. This is the man with the Ring of Gyges made real. Surely this man is the happiest man alive. And Socrates, he looks at Glaucon, and he smiles, and he says, "Happiest? My friend, you are not looking closely enough. This man is not a ruler. He is a slave. First, he is a slave to his own soul. He is a slave to that one monstrous appetite. He is never satisfied. He is a bottomless pit. He is a man dying of thirst who is trying to fill a leaking jar. He never knows a moment's peace. He is always hungry, always needing more. But more than that, look at his life. He thinks he is the master of the city, but he is the only man who is not free. He is a prisoner in his own palace. He cannot go outside. He cannot travel. He cannot see the world. Why? Because everyone hates him. Every single person he has wronged, which is everyone, would kill him in a second if they had the chance. He lives in a fortress, surrounded by guards. And who are his guards? He cannot trust his own citizens. So his guards are mercenaries. They are slaves he has freed. They are the worst of the worst, and he must flatter them. He must pay them his money. He must serve them. The master of the city is a slave to his own bodyguards. He has no friends. He has never known the taste of true friendship. He only knows flatterers and accomplices, and he fears them. He knows that the moment he shows weakness, they will betray him. He is the most powerful and the most lonely man on earth. This is not happiness. This is hell. And then Plato delivers the killing blow. He brings back our metaphor, the soul as a kingdom. Imagine inside this tyrant, he says. Imagine that multi-headed beast, appetite, and that lion, spirit, and that human, reason. In a just man, the human is in charge. He has tamed the lion. They together care for the beast like a farmer cares for his animals. But in the tyrant? In the tyrant, the beast is enormous. It has broken its chains. It is raging. And what has it done to the lion? It has starved it. It has beaten it until the lion is just a cowering cat that fawns at the beast's feet. And the human? The reason? The beast has chained it, enslaved it. It drags the human around, and it forces the human to serve it, to use its intelligence not to find truth, but to find more food for the beast. This is the inner portrait of your happy, unjust man. A monster wearing a human mask. The case is almost closed. Glaucon is shattered. But Socrates has one more proof: the three pleasures. He says there are three types of people: the lover of profit, appetite, the lover of honor, spirit, and the lover of wisdom, reason. Each one will tell you that their pleasure is the greatest. The businessman will say, "Nothing is better than money." The soldier will say, "Nothing is better than winning." The philosopher will say, "Nothing is better than knowing." Who is right? Who is the judge? Well, Socrates asks, who has experienced all three? The businessman, he knows nothing of true honor or wisdom. The soldier, he knows honor and he knows money, but he knows nothing of the pleasure of truth. But the philosopher, the lover of wisdom, he has tasted all three. He has to have money to live. He feels the sting of dishonor and the joy of praise. But he has also tasted the highest pleasure, the pure, perfect pleasure of understanding, of seeing the sun. He is the only one who has tried all the dishes on the menu. He is the only valid judge. And what is his verdict? His verdict is that the pleasure of knowing is infinitely greater than the pleasure of winning or profit. And then the final nail, the strange, magical calculation. Socrates gets almost playful. He says, let's do the math. The oligarch is 1 step from the king. The tyrant is 3 steps. 3 times 3, 9. And if we square it and cube it, the philosopher-king, Socrates declares, is 729 times happier than the tyrant. The number is a joke, but it is also deadly serious. The case is closed. The challenge from Thrasymachus is dead. The perfectly just man, the philosopher, who lives in harmony with his reason, is the happiest man alive. And the perfectly unjust man, the tyrant, who lives as a slave to his beast, is the most miserable wretch in existence. Justice is not a sacrifice. It is health. It is joy. It is home. So, the journey is almost over. The tyrant has been proven 729 times less happy. The Philosopher-King has been vindicated. Justice is health. Justice is happiness. The case is closed. But Socrates is not done. He has one last piece of housekeeping. One old enemy to banish for good. He returns to an argument he started in Book 3, the poets, Homer. And this time his attack is not just about morality, it is about reality. He gives us the 3 beds. First, there is the form of the bed, the idea of bedness. This, he says, is created by God. Second, there is the physical bed, the one you can touch. This is made by a carpenter who is looking at the form. And third, there is the painting of a bed. This is made by an artist. The artist, the poet, he is 3 removes from the truth. He is an imitator of an imitation, a maker of shadows. But this is not the real poison. The real complaint is what art does to you. When you watch a tragedy, Socrates asks, what happens? When a good man in a story loses his son and wails and beats his breast, what do? You enjoy it. You weep. You indulge in your grief. You let go. You feed the lowest part of your soul, the emotional, complaining part, the beast. In real life, he says, if you lost your son, your reason would tell you, be still, be brave, endure. But art waters the weeds in your soul. It makes your beast and your lion stronger, and your human weaker. It is a traitor to your inner city. And so, in his perfect city, the poets must be banished for the health of the soul. And now, the final act. The intellectual part is over. Socrates turns to Glaucon, and you can feel him smile. Remember Book 2? He asks. You made me a promise. You asked me to prove that justice all by itself was good, even if that man was hated by the gods and tortured by men. And we did that. We have proven that justice is the health of the soul. We proved it is happiness itself. The argument is won. And now, Glaucon, that the argument is won, I can give you back the rewards. He says, the gods are watching. The just man is rewarded in this life, but more importantly, after this life. And to prove it, he tells one final story, not an argument, a vision, a myth. The myth of Ur. Ur was a soldier, a brave man who died in battle. His body lay on the field for 10 days, but it did not decay. When they brought him home and placed him on the funeral pyre, he woke up, and he told them what he saw. He said his soul traveled with countless others to a great, mysterious place, a place of judgment. There were 2 holes in the sky above and 2 in the earth below. The judges sat. The just souls were sent up to the right into heaven for 1,000 years of unimaginable reward, 10 times over for every good deed. The unjust souls were sent down to the left into the earth for 1,000 years of agony, 10 times over for every sin. He watched them return, the souls from heaven shining and pure, the souls from the earth filthy, weeping, and broken, telling stories of unspeakable horror. The tyrants, he said, some of them were never allowed to come back up at all. But this was not the end. It was only the intermission. The true climax was the choice. All the souls were gathered before the thrones of the 3 fates, and a prophet took lots and patterns of lives and threw them on the ground. And he announced, "Souls, a new cycle begins. This is not destiny. The choice is yours. Virtue is free. God is blameless." And watched this terrible, beautiful spectacle. He watched a soul who had just come from heaven, a soul who had been good only out of habit, not philosophy. This soul saw the life of a great tyrant laid out. All the power, all the gold, all the glory, and he leapt at it. He chose it instantly, without looking. And then he looked closer, and he saw that his fate was to eat his own children. And the soul screamed. He wept. He beat his breast. He blamed the gods. He blamed destiny. He blamed everyone but himself. His 1,000 years of reward had taught him nothing about choice. And then watched another soul, the soul of Odysseus, the great hero who had seen everything, who had suffered everything, who was so tired of ambition, so tired of fame, so tired of fighting. Odysseus searched and searched, passing over all the kings, all the heroes, all the rich men. And in a corner, forgotten by everyone else, he found it. The life he wanted. The life of a simple, private man. A man who would just mind his own business. And Odysseus wept with joy. And he chose it. This, he said, was the life he would have chosen all along, if he had only known. And with their choice made, the souls drank from the river of forgetfulness, and were born again into this world. Was not allowed to drink. He was sent back to tell us. To tell us what? To tell us that this life matters. To tell us that this life is just the practice for that one terrible moment of choice that defines eternity. To tell us that the only point of philosophy, of education, of reason, is to become the kind of person who knows how to choose, who knows how to tell the difference between a good life and a bad one, not a rich life or a famous one, a good one. And so the book ends. The Republic is not a blueprint for a city. It never was. It is a mirror for your soul. It is a map out of the cave. It is a training manual for that final choice. Plato has answered Thrasymachus. He has saved Glaucon. And he has left us with one final question that echoes forever from that cave and from that place of judgment. The choice is yours. Your soul is in your hands. What kind of life will you choose to live?